The ink on the severance letter was still wet when Breck walked into the wrong bar. Not the wrong bar in the way people mean when they've had one too many and end up somewhere with sticky floors and karaoke versions of songs they hate. Wrong in the way that changes the before and after of a life. Wrong in the way that, looking back, feels almost like it was the only right thing she ever did. But she didn't know that yet. She knew the folder in her bag contained 12 years of her career, reduced to 2 paragraphs and a signature. She knew her heels were too tight because she'd bought them for the promotion celebration she never got to have. She knew the rain outside was the specific kind of Seattle rain that doesn't bother falling in drops. It just exists, a cold, wet presence that gets into everything. The bar was called Escher's. She had never been inside. She'd walked past it 100 times on her way to the Calloway Group's offices. 43 floors of glass and ambition, where Tally had spent 12 years turning other people's chaos into clean spreadsheets and cleaner profits. Where she had, for the last 4 years, essentially run the financial operations of a mid-sized private equity firm, while her boss, Davis Calloway, collected the credit like other people collect stamps. She had stayed because she was good at it, because she told herself loyalty meant something, because she had a number in her head, a retirement figure, a freedom figure, and she was 18 months away from it. Davis called her into his office at 9:15 that morning and told her that the firm was restructuring, that her role had been eliminated, that he was so grateful for everything she'd contributed. He said all of this while his new CFO sat in the chair that used to be Tally's chair during strategy meetings. The new CFO's name was Preston something. He was 29. He had an MBA from Wharton and a firm handshake, and he'd been hired 3 weeks ago, which Tally knew because she had processed the onboarding paperwork herself. Preston something reached across Davis's desk and handed her the folder. She took it. She thanked them both. She walked to her office, packed 14 personal items into a box, and took the elevator down 43 floors without crying. She cried in the lobby bathroom. Briefly. Then she washed her face, picked up her box, walked outside into the not-quite rain. And because she could not face the 40-minute bus ride home while holding a cardboard box full of her professional life, she turned left instead of right and pushed open the door of Escher's. It was a Wednesday afternoon. The bar was nearly empty. She put the box on the floor beside a stool, sat down, and ordered whatever whiskey came in a glass large enough to hold her feelings about the last 12 years. "The Calloway Group," said the bartender, reading the logo on the side of her box. He was young, friendly, the kind of face that made you want to tell him things. "Rough day? Elimination," she said. "Of my position." He winced in the way people do when they want to seem sympathetic, but actually feel relieved it's not them. "First round's on the house." She accepted that. She accepted the second round when it came. She was working on her relationship with the third when the door opened, and the temperature in the bar dropped 3 degrees. She didn't look up immediately. She was doing the math in her head, the specific, terrible math of someone who has just lost their income and is calculating how many months of runway she has before real panic sets in. 14 months, maybe 16 if she was disciplined. 18 if she stopped buying coffee. She had never been able to stop buying coffee. "Miss," the voice came from beside her, low. Patient in the way that very few people are patient. Not with warmth, but with absolute certainty that whatever they said would eventually be heard. She looked up. The man standing next to her stool was tall in a way that seemed structural rather than accidental, like a building that had been designed to take up vertical space. Dark suit, no tie, the kind of fabric that costs more than Tally's monthly rent. There was a scar that ran from the corner of his left eye toward his jaw. Not dramatic, not disfiguring, just present, the way certain facts are just present. He looked like he was somewhere between 35 and the beginning of something much older. His eyes were the exact color of rain on concrete. "You're in my seat," he said. She looked at the empty bar around them. 8 unoccupied stools, a booth in the back, a table by the window. "The entire establishment is your seat?" she asked. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, more like a calculation that had produced an unexpected result. "This particular one," he said. "I was here first. You were. He didn't move. And yet." Behind him, she noticed there were two men in dark jackets standing near the door. Not drinking, not talking, just standing. In the specific way that men stand when their job is to make other men feel like they shouldn't start anything. Tally was not a man, and she had already had the worst day of her professional life, and she was on her third whiskey, and she was, frankly, past caring about territorial arrangements in bars. "There's a whole row of stools," she said. "I'll even slide down one if it means that much to you." She did. She picked up her glass, moved one stool to the right, and turned back to her drink. The man sat down where she'd been. The bartender, who had watched this exchange with the focused attention of someone who very much wanted to keep his limbs attached, materialized immediately. "Mr. Vane," he said, not a greeting, more like an acknowledgement of a natural phenomenon. "Vane." She filed the name away the way she filed everything, automatically, without deciding to. He ordered something she didn't catch, then sat in silence, which she respected, because she was also sitting in silence. They were two people sitting next to each other in a bar not talking, which was one of the great unacknowledged civilized arrangements. This lasted approximately 4 minutes. "What did you do?" he said, not looking at her, "to the Calloway Group?" She turned. "Excuse me." He nodded at the box, the logo. "I know Davis Calloway. Congratulation, not a compliment." She looked at him more carefully. There was something in the way he'd said it, flat, definitive, like a ledger entry, that made her curious, despite herself. "He eliminated my position," she said. "Today, after 12 years. Vane picked up his glass. He considered this the way someone considers a number that doesn't add up. "What was your position?" "Director of Financial Operations. Unofficially, everything that kept that firm from eating itself. Unofficially, officially I was a director. Practically, I was the person who caught Davis's errors before they became lawsuits, built the risk models that let him sleep at night, and trained 3 junior analysts who now make more than I did." She stopped. "Sorry, I'm 3 whiskeys into my severance package." "You're not drunk," he said. "You're angry." She looked at him. "There's a difference," he said. "Drunk people stop calculating. You haven't stopped." That was so precisely accurate that she didn't have an answer for it. She had been calculating since the moment Preston something handed her the folder. She had been calculating long before that. "What did you do to get rid of him?" Vane asked. "Davis? Nothing. That's the point. I mean, what did you do that made him scared enough to remove you?" She stared at him. "I don't know what you. Davis Calloway doesn't eliminate producers," Vane said. "He exploits them. The only time he removes someone useful is when they've become a liability. What did you find?" The rain outside had shifted from ambient to actual. It hit the windows in bursts. Tally set down her glass. She had found something. 3 months ago, running a routine audit of the Q3 projections, she'd noticed a discrepancy in the Harfield account. A series of transfers that didn't correspond to any client-authorized transaction she could identify. Small amounts individually, the kind of thing that passed routine review. But Tally didn't do routine review. She did the kind of review where you look at every number until it tells you the truth. She had flagged it internally, sent it to Davis directly, because that was protocol. Davis had told her it was a legacy accounting structure from before her time. She had accepted that, provisionally, because she needed more data. She had been quietly collecting that data for 11 weeks. The box at her feet contained, among other things, a USB drive. She had not told anyone this. "How do you know Davis Calloway?" she asked. Vane looked at her for a moment that lasted slightly longer than comfortable. "He borrowed money," he said, "from people who borrowed money from me." The 2 men by the door hadn't moved. The bartender had relocated to the far end of the bar and found urgent tasks to perform there. "What kind of business are you in?" Tally said, and she already knew the answer was not going to be something she could find on LinkedIn. "The kind," Vane said, "where accuracy matters more than reputation, and where people who find things they weren't supposed to find either become problems or become assets. I'm not interested in being either. You're sitting in my bar with a box that has a Calloway Group logo on it, and 12 years of institutional knowledge in your head. He finished his drink, set the glass down precisely. You've already been made a problem, miss. Breck, she said, because she had never been able to not answer a direct implicit question. Tally Breck, Miss Breck, you've already been made a problem. The question is whether you'd like to have any agency in how that resolves. She should have left. The sensible thing, the thing that the version of her, who had spent 12 years being sensible and disciplined and 18 months from her number would have done, was to pick up the box, walk out into the rain, take the bus home, and call an employment attorney in the morning. She picked up her glass instead. What do you want? She said specifically. Access to whatever you found in Calloway's books. In exchange for what? To start, Vane said. Information about why you shouldn't walk out of this bar tonight. That gave her pause. Not fear, exactly. Tally had a complicated relationship with fear. She acknowledged it, categorized it, and generally refused to let it make decisions on her behalf. But this was a very specific thing to say. You're saying I'm in danger. I'm saying Davis Calloway has moved quickly today. Your termination was this morning. It's now 4 in the afternoon. He glanced at her. The kind of men he's borrowed money from, not me, the ones below me, they solve problems expediently. She thought about the car she'd noticed parked outside the Calloway Group building when she left. Black SUV, engine running, no commercial plates. She'd noticed it the way she noticed everything, automatically, without deciding to. She had not connected it to herself. She connected it now. This is a very elaborate way to recruit a financial analyst, she said. I'm not recruiting you. What are you doing then? For the first time, he looked at her with something that might, in different lighting, have been respect. I'm offering you a choice, he said. That's more than Davis Calloway offered you this morning. The choice, as it turned out, was not simple. Vane's name, she learned over the following 48 hours, was Cassian Vane. He ran a syndicate that operated in the specific gray zone between legitimate finance and the kind of finance that doesn't get discussed in quarterly earnings calls. He was not, he made clear, a violent man by preference. He was a precise man who operated in an imprecise world and had built over 20 years a reputation for exactness that was more feared than any weapon. He needed someone who could read his books and make them disappear, not destroy them, not falsify them, make them, his word, invisible, structured in a way that allowed his legitimate operations to breathe without the other kind suffocating them. That's money laundering, Tally said, on day 2, sitting across from him in a glass-walled office that looked out over Elliott Bay. It's architecture, he said. The money itself is clean. The structure needs redesigning. The distinction matters legally. The distinction matters to me, because I'm not asking you to hide crime. I'm asking you to build something that doesn't collapse under scrutiny. She looked at the accounts he'd spread across the table. She looked at them the way she looked at everything, until the numbers started talking. They were a mess. Not a dishonest mess, actually. An inherited mess, the kind that happens when a business grows faster than its infrastructure, and nobody with actual financial architecture experience has ever sat down and untangled it. She could see 4 separate systems trying to coexist. She could see where they kept bumping into each other. She could also see very clearly exactly how to fix it. She hated that she could see that. I need to know what happened to Davis Calloway first, she said. He's been encouraged, Vane said, to relocate his borrowing relationships. That's not an answer. He's alive, solvent, and has agreed to remove any outstanding concerns about former employees. He looked at her. The USB drive you had in that box has been received and reviewed by 2 parties with a shared interest in Davis's cooperation. He understands the arrangement. She had not told him about the USB drive. She had not mentioned it at all. How did you? Because it's what I would have done, he said simply. 12 years. You found something. You kept a copy. The rain had stopped. The bay outside was doing that thing it does after Seattle rain, where the light turns silver, and everything looks provisional, like the world is deciding whether to commit to the day. I'm not doing this permanently, she said. No one does anything permanently. I mean, I'm not your employee. I'll consult. I'll fix the structure. I'll walk you through the architecture so whoever you hire next can maintain it. Fine, and I want access to whatever you have on the Harfield account transfers. If Davis was running something that touched your network, I want to know the full shape of it." He looked at her for a moment. "Why? Because I spent 11 weeks on those numbers and I want to know what they were. I'm not interested in revenge." She paused. "I'm interested in knowing the truth of a thing I spent time on. That's different." Something shifted in him then. Not much. A fractional adjustment, like a figure in a ledger being moved to the correct column. "All right," he said. The Harfield account, it turned out, was a ghost. Tally spent 6 days in Vane's glass-walled office with 3 screens and access to records that should not technically exist, and pieced together what Davis had been doing. It was elegant, in the way that bad things sometimes are elegant, a series of holding companies, each one a legal entity in a different jurisdiction, all of them tied to a central account that ran parallel to the Calloway Group's legitimate operations. Davis had been skimming, not from clients, which would have been detectable. From the margins, the spread between what he projected and what he reported, captured in the gap and siphoned through Harfield before the quarter closed. He'd been doing it for 7 years. Tally sat back and looked at the screen. 7 years. She had been doing his risk models for 7 years. She had been building the very projections he was using as cover. "You look like someone did math you didn't expect," said Vane from the doorway. He had a habit of appearing without announcement, which she had stopped being startled by around day 4. "I helped him do it," she said. "Not on purpose, but the projection models I built were the vehicle. You didn't know. I should have looked harder. You looked hard enough to find it eventually, 11 weeks too late." He came and stood beside her, looking at the screen. He smelled like cedar, and something she couldn't name, specific, not unpleasant, the kind of scent that registers before you decide to notice it. "In my experience," he said, 11 weeks faster than everyone else isn't late. It's early." She looked at him. 3 auditing firms reviewed those books," he said. "Over 7 years. None of them found it. You found it in the margin of a Q3 projection at 11 at night, presumably because something didn't line up. The Harfield entries were using a rounding convention that didn't match the rest of the file," she said. 2 decimal places instead of 4. Somebody changed the formatting to match later, but I caught it in a version that hadn't been updated yet." He was quiet for a moment. 2 decimal places, he said. "It's the kind of thing that gets dismissed as a formatting inconsistencies. But you don't dismiss formatting inconsistencies. Numbers are either consistent or they're not," she said. "Inconsistency means something changed. Something that changed means someone changed it. Someone changing things means there's a reason." Vane was looking at her with an expression she couldn't fully read. She was good at reading people. She had learned, over 12 years of being underestimated, that the information people gave away when they thought no one was paying attention was often more useful than anything they said deliberately. But Vane kept his information close, parceled out in the specific quantities he decided to release, and the rest of it just stayed contained behind the concrete-colored eyes. "I need to hire you," he said. "We discussed this. I'm consulting permanently. I need someone who catches 2 decimal place inconsistencies at 11 at night and doesn't dismiss them. I'm not interested in a permanent arrangement with a..." She gestured vaguely at the room, at the files, at him. "Syndicate. I prefer the term organization. Your preference doesn't change the nature of the arrangement." He didn't argue. That was one of the things she'd noticed about Vane. He didn't argue with true statements. He either redirected or he waited. The waiting was sometimes worse than arguing. "What would it take," he said, "to make you interested?" She looked at him, at the scar at the corner of his eye, at the way he stood, like he'd calculated exactly how much space he needed, and was taking precisely that much and no more. The truth was, and she had been trying not to look at this truth directly, because truths you look at directly tend to become harder to set aside. The truth was that she had not felt this engaged by a problem in years, maybe ever. The Calloway Group had given her stability. It had given her something that looked, from the outside, like a career. But it had not given her this specific quality of challenge, where every answer opened 3 new questions, and the numbers underneath everything were genuinely, compellingly complicated. "Tell me what the organization actually does," she said. "The full picture, not the version you give people." He considered this. "That's not something I do. Then we don't have an arrangement." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he sat down, across from her, and told her. It took 2 hours. He was precise, unsentimental, and comprehensive. He described operations she would never have imagined, structures she found herself mentally mapping even as he talked, decision-making frameworks that were, in their cold way, almost elegant. He talked about it the way she talked about financial architecture, as a system, with inputs and outputs and pressure points and failure modes. He was the only person who had ever talked to her about complicated things the way she thought about them. She was aware that this was a problem. She was also aware that she was going to say yes. "The arrangement is this," she said when he finished. "I clean up the structure. I build something that holds. I have full visibility into any operation that touches the financial layer. I don't manage the operations, but I see the numbers behind them, and if I see something that concerns me, I say so and you listen. Define listen. Consider seriously. Respond with reasoning. Not necessarily comply, but engage." He thought about this. "And in exchange, fair compensation. Real compensation, not consulting day rates. And the Harfield documentation goes to the DA's office anonymously." That last part she'd been holding. She watched him process it. "Davis Calloway," he said, "has already cooperated. I know. I don't care about Davis specifically. I care about the 7 years. The people whose money moved through Harfield, some of them were real clients. They deserve the record to exist somewhere. That creates exposure for." "I've looked at what you have," she said. "The anonymous route doesn't trace back to this office. I'll build the submission structure myself. It'll be clean." He looked at her for a long moment. "You're going to be very expensive," he said. "You have no idea," she said. He almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. The Harfield file reached the DA's office on a Thursday. Tally submitted it from a layered anonymous pathway that she had spent 4 days engineering specifically so that the origin point was untraceable. She knew, because she had built it herself, and she had never built anything that didn't do exactly what she designed it to do. That same Thursday, she received a formal letter from the Calloway Group, drafted, she suspected, with significant legal encouragement, confirming her severance package, extending it, and including a non-disparagement clause she had approximately 0 intention of signing. She set it on the desk in the office that had, over the past 2 weeks, become hers in some informal, unnamed way. It had the best view of the bay. It had 3 screens. It had a coffee setup that she had specified herself because nobody else in an organization full of men who thought espresso was a complete sentence had apparently considered that some people needed options. Vane appeared in the doorway. He did this, she'd accepted, as a structural feature of working with him. "The letter," he said, looking at it. "Non-disparagement clause. Are you signing it?" "Absolutely not." He didn't say anything. "I have nothing disparaging to say," she said. "The facts are disparaging enough on their own. But I'm not signing a legal document that implies I might have something to hide. The settlement amount is... I know what the settlement amount is. I did the math. Most people," Vane said, "would sign it." She looked at him. "I'm aware that I'm not most people. You hired me specifically because I'm not most people. I retained you as a consultant," he said. Technically, she agreed. He came in and sat down across from her. The same configuration as 3 days ago, when he'd told her things he didn't tell people. He looked at the settlement letter, at the 3 screens, at the coffee setup, at the view of the bay. He looked at all of it with the expression of someone who is cataloging, not judging. "You know," he said, "most people who come through that front door either become problems or disappear. You said assets. Problems or assets. I revised my assessment. To what?" He picked up the settlement letter, looked at it, set it back down. "Something else," he said. She looked at him, at the careful, precise, deliberately unreachable man across the desk. at the scar and the rain-colored eyes and the 2 hours of truth he had given her in exchange for 2 hours of hers. "That's not a category," she said. "It is now," he said. "I'm adding it to the books." Outside, Elliott Bay had gone gold with the late afternoon, the kind of light that makes Seattle look like it was always meant to be here, like the rain was just preparation for this specific hour. Breck, who had been eliminated, restructured, handed a folder, and walked into the wrong bar, looked at the light on the water and thought that 12 years ago she had chosen stability because she was 23 and terrified and needed a number to work toward. She was not terrified now. She was something she didn't have an accounting category for either, which was, in its way, exactly right. She picked up her pen. She did not sign the letter. She signed, instead, the consulting agreement that Vane had placed on her desk on day 3, and that she had been revising, quietly, ever since. 16 pages, 2 riders, and 1 clause that she had added herself in the margin, in handwriting precise enough to read in court. Partner, she had written. Not asset, not employee. Partner. He had read it yesterday. He had not removed it. She put the pen down. She looked out at the bay. Somewhere across the city, Davis Calloway was having a conversation with federal investigators that he had not been expecting, about a Harfield account that he had been very confident nobody would ever fully trace. She had traced it. That was the thing about numbers, about columns and ledgers, and the invisible grammar of financial architecture. They remembered everything. Every transaction, every adjustment, every 2 decimal place formatting inconsistency that someone hoped would be dismissed as noise. The truth was always in the books, if you looked long enough and cared enough to keep looking. Breck had always kept looking. She was exactly where she was supposed to be.